Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Good evening,
Hey,
Jess.
guys. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Jessie. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for joining, guys. Um, Having another webinar session. See some of you guys are joining. Let's just wait for Chris to join. I hope we got the timing right. I guess so. Oh, there he is. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Doing so well. How are you?
You're good. I'm good. Thank you. What time is it over there?
I'm actually on the West Coast in California, so it's 9 a.m.
Okay, nice. Morning. It's the end of the day here. It's 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we can start. First of all, thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you, Chris, for joining. I mean, the way I do this usually is like I just kind of the whole purpose of these webinar series is basically to just give some kind of insight to all the students who are attending, and of course I'm also recording this so we can maybe send it later to other people that couldn't make it. It's just to kind of shed some more light on like what it's actually like inside the industry, and especially in the different departments, the different positions that are out there that I think a lot of people are not even aware of. Like I remember myself a couple of years back, I wanted to work in sports, but I wasn't sure like, you know, what different options or career prospects I had. And that's why I enjoy speaking to, and also for networking purposes, of course, it's great to just kind of speak to different people. And yeah, we actually virtually met on LinkedIn the other day, Chris, right? Because we kind of both have the same aspirations to help other people kind of become or pursue the same career path that we pursued ourselves. So I don't know if you just want to start off kind of briefly introducing yourself, and then maybe dive a little bit deeper into your journey as a sports analyst today.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Jessie. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my experience. Like you mentioned, you know, we both kind of have the goal of helping other people get into sports, the industry in general. And I am, to introduce myself a little bit, I'm a sports analyst at ESPN. So at ESPN, they have a sports analytics team that does a lot of their advanced metrics. So if you follow like the NBA, we do basketball power index, or if you follow the NFL, we do QBR, quarterback rating, things like that. So we just build models that essentially evaluate teams or players and try to give the fans a better experience. So it's a ton of fun. I love my job. It's super, super enjoyable. But I was once in all of your shoes, wanted to do sports analytics, wanted to get into the sports industry, and I didn't really know how to do it. And frankly, I spent a lot of time doing stuff that didn't help me at all. So hopefully, you know, my goal in this webinar and in the future is to share things that can help you not spend your time in places that aren't really going to help you. So I got my degrees in statistics. So I have an undergraduate and a master's in statistics. And that basically and then I got this job at ESPN. So that's basically what my experience has been. Most everything before that was either not in sports or it was for free in sports. So ESPN was really my first paid gig. So it's been a lot of fun to be there. Yeah, I guess if you want, Jessie, I'll just hop into kind of how I got into ESPN and what my journey was like. Cool. Okay. So in like 2018, like the end or summer of 2018, I don't know if we have any NBA fans that are on the Zoom, but LeBron was with the Cavs at the time, and I was just getting into sports. So I was kind of like a late bloomer. I didn't follow sports a ton as a kid. And then when I got into college, I was like, oh, this is actually really fun. And LeBron James with the Cavs, he had that ridiculous 2018 playoff run where, he set a bajillion records. I don't even know. He shot like 80% in the clutch. He outplayed both, Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan on the Raptors. If you're an NBA fan, you're following me. It was a lot of fun. And that was really cool for me. And I started thinking like, this is really fun. Could I make this into a career? And so that's when I really started looking at sports jobs that were out there, like what I could do. At the time, I was a computer science undergrad and I wasn't really loving it. So I was looking for other opportunities and things I could do. And eventually that led me to statistics. So I, in the summer of 2019, paid like $500 to go to this scouting school that took place in Las Vegas during the NBA Summer League. And I'll save you the $500. The only thing that really helped me was they said, if you're looking for like a gig in sports analytics, reach out to like local community colleges or even like a G League team in the NBA or a lower league team and some other sport. And like, they don't have any money, but they'll take you on for free because they don't have the money to pay anybody to do what you want to do. So I sent an email to like 15 different colleges in my state and just said, hey, I'm a statistics student. I want to do sports analytics and I'm willing to work for free. And I heard back from one of the 15, but they said, yeah, sure. Like, we can't pay you, but you can do whatever you want because, it was a local community college. And they said, sure. So I came onto their staff as an assistant coach. I knew hardly anything about, I was still new in statistics and I didn't know a ton about basketball strategy and things, but they gave me their statistics and they said, run with it. I helped them implement a few things. We had a fun season. And honestly, like I probably wasn't super helpful to them, but it was an awesome experience for me, like learning what it was like to be in the industry, what I could actually do to be helpful and things like that. So that was kind of my first, it wasn't paid, but my first legitimate experience in sports analytics. And then probably about a year after that, I decided I was just about to finish my undergrad. And I thought, yeah, I really want to make sure like this is what I want to do. I don't want to have backup plans. I don't want to try a different industry. Like, I want to do sports analytics. And so that's when I decided to go get my master's. So I applied to some places, ended up being accepted to Berkeley and being able to do my master's at UC Berkeley. And along the way, I met a guy who worked on the ESPN sports analytics team on LinkedIn. So this will be a bit of my advice at the end, but I met him on LinkedIn and found out he was teaching a class about sports analytics. I enrolled in his class, did like a project kind of underneath him. And then like 6 months later, he posted on LinkedIn that his team was hiring. So this was over the summer and I applied and it was a lengthy process. Honestly, it was much longer than I expected. But yeah, to give you a little bit of insight into the experience, they started out with a phone screen and they basically just called me and said, hey, what's your favorite sports? Who do you like? What do you know about statistics? How competent are you with like R and Python and SQL and things like that? And so I told them, and then I had a couple more interviews, and then I had a technical assessment, which was my time to shine. I think of myself as an okay interviewer. I'm not great. So I really like the technical assessments when nobody's watching me. I could just crank. So that was a lot of fun. And then I had a couple more interviews after that and was able to get the job with their team at ESPN. So that's kind of like the high level overview of kind of what my journey's been like. There were a lot of little unpaid gigs and projects along the way that hopefully over the course of this we'll talk more about. But yeah, that's the general idea. So.
Well, thank you so much for that brief overview. Like it was great to hear more about your journey. It's very inspiring, and actually I just wrote down a few things that I found remarkable, because whenever I speak to students about like getting into the industry and stuff, there's several things that I think are very important. To start with, it's finding your niche, and you have a very specific niche, the same as for me, a sports lawyer or sports analyst. Like that's very niche, and it's probably a job that maybe 50 years ago people couldn't even imagine, or a lot of students are not even aware of. So I love how you kind of through some other experiences actually found out that okay, you can turn your statistics interest into and combine it with working in sports and work into sports analytics. So I found that amazing. And then also the fact that You mentioned that you actually did some volunteer work, because whenever I speak to students, they're always asking me like how to gain that first work experience and how to, get in touch with a team or whatever. Or if you want to apply for a job, let's say at ESPN, like you need to show that you've done something before. And usually getting that first work experience in is so difficult. So to hear firsthand from someone that actually volunteered, because that's something I always tell them, like, I think it's so important to even work for free, guys. Like, it's all about getting that experience, and maybe you can't be that valuable to them, or they're not that valuable to you, whatever, but just being there and on the field, kind of like doing the work, with, even if it's within a limited capacity, I think is so important. So that, and then the last thing was the LinkedIn part. I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn. I actually didn't discover LinkedIn until like a year ago. But I've been very much on it now. I think it's the best place to network. And again, you're like the perfect school example of someone that actually found their job through LinkedIn because you made some previous contact with a person. So just to dive into that a little bit deeper, like, because a lot of people ask me like how, because it's not the same applying to a job when maybe you didn't know the person because you wouldn't have seen the job opening. How was that first contact with that person that you said you met on LinkedIn? Did you reach out to them saying like, hey, I want a job, do you have something? Because that happens a lot, but it usually doesn't get you far. Like, how was that first contact with him or her?
Yeah. No, LinkedIn's been huge in my journey. I think sometimes when you're on LinkedIn and you hear people on LinkedIn say, hey, you should use LinkedIn, it feels a little like disingenuous because it's like, yeah, of course you'd want me to use LinkedIn. Like, we're all on here. But it's legit. I got that very first, volunteer opportunity by emailing, like I mentioned. Everything I've done in sports since is through LinkedIn. Well, I saw somebody else post, I messaged somebody, everything. And so it's been huge for me. For him in specific, his name is Paul. He's part of the ESPN sports analytics team. And I actually he posted something and like someone in my network liked it. So I saw it. And he was talking about this class that he was teaching in sports analytics. So I commented on his post and just said like, oh yeah, that sounds like something I'd be really interested in. I'll check it out. And that was really it. And then I found the information about the class and took the class. And at some point during the class, I don't even know when, I shot him a connection on LinkedIn and just said like, hey, I'm in your class, would love to connect. And he was like, sure. And so that was really it. And then at some point after the class, I shot him a message because I really believe in being active on LinkedIn and trying to build these connections. So I shot him a message that said, hey, like, what was something, and I try to be really specific. There's lots of different strategies, but this is the one I took. And I just said, hey, what was something that you did prior to getting your gig at ESPN that you feel like really helped you, be a valuable member of the team, basically. And that was it. And I had previously, like I said, mentioned that I took his class. And so he responded to me and he actually talked about a couple of things that he felt like could be helpful. And that was it. I don't even think I responded to him after that. I might have said thanks. And left it. And then a couple of months later, he posted that they were hiring. And so I reached out again at that point and I said, hey, I just want to let you know, like I sent in an application. Do you have any suggestions on the interview process and things like that? And so then he gave me some feedback on the interview process and he ended up sending me the recruiter's email. So I shot an email to the recruiter. And I think kind of all of that, I don't know exactly kind of what triggers it, but kind of all of that helped my case when I was going through the interview process. Like the first person I interviewed already knew who I was because Paul had talked briefly about me to him. So he kind of was familiar. And I just think like all of those things helped me. So yeah, but this is my success story, right? I finally got the gig. I've messaged so many people on LinkedIn that never responded to me. In fact, I've been getting lots of messages about getting into sports analytics. And I was going back through my messages, trying to make sure I didn't miss any. And I found one where I had messaged a coach in the NBA. I think he was an assistant coach on the Jazz. And I sent him a message, basically, same thing I always send a lot of people. And he had never responded. And I had a couple others like that. And they just made me laugh. Like, yeah, I sent these and they never responded. And I've completely forgot about them because eventually somebody does and it starts building success. So, yeah.
I love that. And I think it's so valid, like your point that, because people might look at you, and the same for me, like they think, oh my God, you're so lucky, like you knew someone or whatever. But it's, in the end of the day, it's not being lucky. It's just hard work in the sense that it's just like keep trying. You have to be persistent. You have to keep trying, and eventually one person will respond. Like sometimes it takes 100 emails and for one person to respond. And also because people might think, oh my gosh, so he had like a little bit of an unfair advantage in the sense that the recruiter already knew you or whatever, but that's not the case. That's just because you had reached out to that person on LinkedIn before, and you didn't go in and ask right away like, hey, can you offer me a job? You actually ask that person like, oh, can you give me any tips on what you did prior? So you ask the person about their journey, which I think is a great approach, and that helped you. So I fully agree. It's like a compound effect, doing little things, and eventually you can't really pinpoint what it was, but it's everything that kind of helped your case. And I love that, because it is so difficult to get into the industry, because it is a rather close and niche industry. But at the same time, like social media and like platforms like LinkedIn have made it so much easier and so much more accessible to everyone. Like it's just a matter of doing the work. Like you actually have to, so for some people it might not come naturally to send out messages all day or to show interest in that person's life or in this one, but it really does make such a difference. And that's what differentiates you working at ESPN now from maybe other aspiring sports analysts that haven't gotten to that point yet, because it's just, maybe it's maybe the next person that you message is going to respond. So I love that. But yeah, so I just want to ask you a bit more into the sports analytic part. So I'm asking you the question now, what is it that you would advise to aspiring sports analysts right now that helps you in your journey? I mean, we've already spoken about your journey, but is there some general advice that you would have for people that right now are sitting at home and they want to do the same thing, but they're not sure where to start? Like, do you think they should start putting out content, sending messages on LinkedIn, volunteering? Like, do you have like maybe 3 tips or something?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You kind of already stole my first favorite one, which is pick a specific role, kind of like you're talking about, find your niche. Like there are a lot of different sports analytics jobs, and obviously in the sports industry in general, there's a ton of different jobs, and there's almost anything for anyone, especially at like a company like ESPN. I mean, we have everything from sports analysts like me, broadcasters, people who just do data, technicians, like there's almost anything, and you get to be connected to sports, and it's a lot of fun. So one thing that helped me a lot was picking a specific role that I really wanted, looking at kind of the job description, and then I just went all in on trying to get that specific role. And that did 2 things for me. One, I built really specific skills and got really good at those things. And 2, when I interviewed for jobs and met people online and things, I got a lot of comments on like how kind of motivated, committed towards this specific role I was. Yeah. And so even if I applied to a different job that was kind of a different role, they saw how kind of committed and motivated I was towards whatever role I had picked. And that was kind of valued. And so even if my skills were slightly different than what I was applying for, they appreciated like, oh yeah, you saw this and you really tried to go get it. And we see that as valuable, because all of these teams and organizations want somebody who's like really passionate and excited, because they can find that. There's so many people passionate about sports. They want somebody who's passionate, excited, and motivated, and it's going to help them succeed. So that was kind of my like first bit, and you kind of stole that. So I totally agree with that. Find something specific and match what you're doing towards that. My number 2, after you've kind of picked like, okay, this is what I want to do, is do a project. If you can find free work, right? Do free work. If you can't, just do a project. And there are tons of organizations out there, right? You reach out to like a local college that has the sport that you want to do, or reach out to a local news organization that covers the sport that you want to do, and just say like, hey, I did this project. I analyzed your views on your pages, and this is the type of, media that you put out that's the most, most people look at. Or, hey, I looked at how often you guys score in the 4th quarter, and when you score in the 4th quarter, you win, and when you don't, you lose, whatever it is. I mean, my very first project, and this was before I got the opportunity with the local community college to be an assistant coach, was for my own NFL fantasy team. I had a little fantasy team, fantasy football, and I was like, hey, can I use statistics to make this better? And I built a really terrible model in Excel to help me pick players, and it sucked, and I did terrible, and I lost in my league. But it didn't really matter, because later on I wrote an article about it, and when I was actually interviewing for ESPN, I talked with one of the interviewers about this model I built for fantasy, because this guy had gotten into the industry through fantasy. So it's just like, really, whatever you choose to do is going to end up being applicable in some way. It's just about picking something and going for it. So that would be like my big piece of advice, is find a personal project or find an organization that would take some free work. And even if they don't take it, like the value is in building the project, doing if you're in sports analytics, particularly doing the model, or maybe you want to build some type of visual or data visualization or something like that. But the idea is just take something, run with it, focus on it, and make it yours. And even if whatever organization you did it for doesn't want that, it's going to be hugely valuable to you, both in your learning process and in your future job applications. So it's kind of like a kill two birds with one stone. That's the biggest thing that I try to tell people.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I completely agree. I mean, I think even just like offering, even for example, as a lawyer, like sometimes people come to me like, oh, I wrote an article on this. Can you please review it? That already shows proactivity, and it just creates that kind of like kind of bond with the student, and it will eventually get you somewhere. So I fully agree with that. My next question is like, what does your typical day-to-day actually look like? Like, what do you do? What, like, for people that are a bit more ignorant, like, what do you do actually? What is a sports analyst? Like, what is it
great
that
question.
you do?
So first, for people who like aren't statisticians or aren't familiar with the data analytics industry, basically ESPN has loads of data, as you might be able to guess, on sports. And we have an awesome team in our sports department that makes sure all of that data is fantastically, beautifully organized. So I don't have to do that, which is awesome. And most of my day, I use SQL and R. Basically, I'm trying to pull and organize the data in a way that I can answer some questions. So most of the time, our team has some kind of story that we want to cover or some kind of question we want to answer. Like, for example, the Super Bowl is in a week. So obviously that's a big focus for ESPN. So the last like week or two, ESPN's wanted to be able to write information and write some articles about prop betting. So our team's kind of been learning more about prop betting. We spent some time watching videos, and then we're pulling data and trying to build a model that can help bettors know which side of a prop bet they should be on. And that's what we're spending most of our time doing. So it's a lot of basically just trying to use data and build a model to answer questions. For the data analysts who kind of understand the more granular stuff, like I said, I use SQL. So SQL has been huge. And interestingly enough for me, I don't know if this is usual, but I didn't really know SQL prior to getting this job. I had learned R and I knew tidyverse, but SQL wasn't something I picked up along the way. And so that was kind of an interesting experience for me. But I've been learning it on the job. So I use SQL, and then we do all our modeling and everything in R. We use a lot of tidyverse. And again, if you're familiar, ESPN has some really fun packages, like they have their own color scheme, and it's just like fun to use R and use those packages. So that's basically what I do, both on like a general level and a little bit more particular. But yeah, so most of my time is modeling and pulling data, or trying to learn more about whatever I'm trying to model about.
Awesome. And so in the beginning you said like, oh, you actually need to work on a project or whatever, but how did you get that knowledge? How did you gain that first knowledge? Like, how did you know what did you do? How did you know what to do when you first, decided to volunteer or whatever? Like, were you not nervous thinking, oh my God, I don't have any experience. How am I going to do this? What value am I going to deliver to them? Like, where did you get the knowledge from?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I mentioned, if you went back and you asked that local community college, hey, how helpful was Chris Harden in 2019? They'd probably be like, who? I probably wasn't actually that helpful. And the biggest benefit was just me learning and getting experience. Now I could put on my resume, hey, I was an assistant coach and I did sports analytics. And that was huge for me. And I tried really hard to be helpful, but yeah, I was new. And so I would say, don't be afraid to not be helpful. Like, it's okay. Heck, most of the time, like we talked about, you're working for free or it's a personal project. Like, if it's not helpful, that's okay. Nobody's going to be like, oh, this guy that is working for us for free is terrible. Like, no, they don't even care. You're for free. So don't be scared that you're not going to be able to add value. And then B is just ask questions. That's something I've always really tried to do throughout my career, is don't be afraid to ask people questions. Say, hey, like, what can I do that's most valuable? Or, hey, I did this. What do you like about it? What do you not? And the more feedback you can get from people who are already in the industry, the better. Like Jessie mentioned, if you send a message to somebody on LinkedIn, you're like, hey, this is what I did. Do you have any thoughts? I love looking at dashboards or models that people send me. And it's much more interesting than when somebody says, hey, are there any jobs at ESPN? Like I'm less likely to respond to that message. But if somebody messages me and says, hey, this is what I've been working on, check it out, asks questions, tries to get feedback and improve, I'll probably respond to them. And then if a month later they're like, hey, is there any jobs at ESPN? I'm more inclined to answer because I remember that they built something and they actually showed me what they do. So I don't know, hopefully that kind of helps. It's a lot of learning as you go, I think, in the sports industry. I don't know if that was your experience as well, but that's what I experienced.
Exactly. That's kind of what I wanted to get to. Like, it's really learning as you go, because now, like, it sounds like, oh my God, like, you know, you're working for ESPN, like you must have gained had so much experience before, this and that. And of course you have, but at the same time, it's learning as you go. And me, myself, I'm a relatively young lawyer. Like, I obviously do not have the knowledge or the experience that a 60-year-old lawyer would have, but it's learning as you go. And I feel like, and I always kind of talk about it, like this imposter syndrome and feeling like, oh my God, like I can never be as good as this and this person. Or I think that's what holds a lot of people back, and they feel like, oh my God, I'm just a student, like I don't know what I could offer or whatever. And I'm sure that we've all been in that position. And like you were saying, you probably were not that valuable, or people may not remember you, but at the end of the day, for you, it was very valuable. So it's kind of, and it was for free, so it's kind of like a win-win. So yeah, I definitely think learning as you go is very important, and it's okay to embrace the process, you know. That's something that for example, with LinkedIn and with networking and all of that, like it's okay if the first few times people don't respond, but you just got to keep trying and putting out content and like doing these little projects. Maybe the first time it kind of sucks, it's not that good. Maybe, you know, you send it to someone like Chris or yourself, so a student sends it to you and you're like, oh my God, this is not that good. But you know, that's how you improve. You get feedback. Like, it's just kind of making use of the tools, I guess, that you have at your disposal to kind of work with what you have. And do you have like any good recommendations in terms of programs that students could follow, courses, websites, podcasts about sports analytics, like where any good content that you look at?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, honestly, LinkedIn is awesome. I have a list of LinkedIn follows. So if anybody's interested in that, you can shoot me a message after this and I'm happy to share it, of basically just people like myself who are in sports analytics and posting really great content or tips. But interestingly enough, for sports, Twitter is also a great place. There's a really large Twitter community, sports analytics community on Twitter. And so and same thing, I have a list of people that I love to follow. So if you want it, shoot me a message. But it's a great place because there's a lot of people like you who are trying to get into the sports analytics industry. And so they're posting articles or dashboards that they've made on Twitter. And so you can start interacting with other people there. And most people are really awesome. They have a great sense of community. And so you can get lots of good feedback. You can post an article, and you know, if you're on Twitter, you know that people are not shy about sharing their opinions. So you'll get tons of feedback, good and bad. But those have been two places where I've connected with a lot of people. I did the traditional route for school. So I haven't done any like programs or courses outside of school. But I do know that when I interviewed for the job, they cared a lot more about what I had done than my degree. I mean, I don't even think we talked about school. Like, they knew I was in school, but we didn't even talk about it. They just wanted to know about my projects and what things I had done, looked at my website, like things like that. And that's what they were really interested in. So if you're not going the traditional route in school, as long as you're in a program or a course that's helping you build those skills so you can do your own projects, you're on the right track.
Yeah, I think that's so important as well, because I think a lot of times people, you know, sometimes they pursue like 5 different master's degrees or LLMs, and they want to become the expert of the experts. But at the end of the day, in a job interview, yeah, it's great that you have all that knowledge, but it's really more about what you actually have done. And even if it's on a small scale, like those small projects or volunteer work, that's actually what matters most. And then you know what you're talking about, obviously, but you know, becoming an expert and having all the knowledge in the world isn't going to get you far if you don't put in the work in terms of actually gaining some experience and actually meeting people, because then you will never be able to apply that knowledge. So I think that's something that, especially here in Europe, a lot of people spend a lot of money on different master's degrees, and I have done so myself. And when I look back now, I'm like, okay, some of it was great and I needed some of the knowledge, but at the same time now there's so many different shorter courses online or stuff like that, or even webinars like these where maybe you learn even more from than, you know, pursuing 5 different LLMs. So yeah, I love that.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I think it's a little bit overhyped. I mean, there are smarter people than me in sports analytics. I know, I don't know who they are, but like I know, and I mean, I guess I do. There's plenty on my own team, but I'm just saying, like, there are plenty out there that didn't get this job that I have. And a lot of that's probably because they didn't have projects and personal connections and some of the other things that I had put in. And like I said, they're probably smarter than me. They know probably statistics better than me, or maybe they know R or SQL better than me. But ESPN they liked, oh, we can see right here that you've done this job. Like, we're not worried about hiring you because we can literally see that you're already doing what we're going to hire you to do. And so it was a no-brainer. And yeah, I think, you know, schooling's important. You should have a good understanding of what you're doing. But especially in the sports industry, and maybe in a little bit it's unique that way, they care a lot more about what you've actually done. You know, a lot of times just like playing the sport, they're like, oh, you know the sport, awesome. Like, they don't care if you've been traditionally educated. They just want to know that you can contribute to their team. So I 100% agree.
Exactly. And to jump a little bit deeper into that, before we can move on to the questions, but so what do you think, like, how did you know that your passion for sports was you were going to be able to turn that into a job? Like, there's a lot, I'm sure there's, you know, half the planet is interested in sports or they love watching football or basketball or whatever, but what is it that made you think like, oh my God, I can actually turn this into a job, like I can actually work in sports? Like, were you not thinking, oh, I'm just going to be, you know, pursuing a traditional statistics career? Like, what was it that made you understand that?
Totally. That's a good question. I'm not sure I really knew that I could turn it into a job until I did. You know, there's always a little bit of uncertainty there. I knew it was a hard industry. I was nervous. You know, I've got 2 kids and a wife. I was like terrified that we'd be stuck. I'd be applying to jobs and I wouldn't have one. And, you know, like I wouldn't be able to provide. That was definitely a fear for me. And that's a hard thing to kind of overcome. When I first thought, hey, you know, maybe I can make sports a job, it was always in my mind, like, if, you know, it wasn't I'm definitely going to go do this. Or I shouldn't say always. For a long time, that's what it was. And I spent a lot of my time, I was going to do data analytics in finance. So actually, if anybody's familiar with the financial industry, I went and got my CFA. And I was like spending a lot of time investing heavily in making sure I was qualified for a financial career. And when I would have conversations with my wife, it would be like, hey, if sports fails, then I have this backup of finance, you know? And I do think that can be important, right? Like, you know, there's a possibility that you're not able to get a sports job. And so it's good to have skills that transfer to another industry. But probably about, I don't know, a year and a half ago, I had been thinking a lot about it. I had a lot of conversations with my wife. And at some point it was like, no, I really want to do sports analytics. Like, this is what I really want to do. I don't want to do finance. I want to do sports analytics. And I know it's a job because I've met people who have the job. So I know it exists. I'm going to go get that job and I'm going to die trying. And if I die trying, then I'll do finance. And that was kind of what it turned into. And so I quit studying finance. I quit doing the things that it was kind of my backup, knowing I could come back to that if I needed. And I put all my eggs in the sports analytics basket, so to speak. And I think that I don't think it's a downside to have a backup, but I do think that you have to decide, like, I'm going to give this my all, because those are the people who end up getting the sports gigs, right? They're the people who are like, I'm doing this and I'm giving it my all. The people who kind of have it as a pastime and they don't really care about it that much, they don't end up getting the job because it's that competitive. And so I think it's really like, you have to you pick that specific role you want, you give it your all, you become the most qualified person ever for that specific role, and you work to network and all these other things we talked about. And then trust me, if it doesn't work out, there's another job that your skills will apply fantastically for. Like, nothing in the sports industry is not going to transfer. And so you're not going to be wasting your time anyway. So that's kind of how it transformed for me, as I realized that. And I said, hey, if this all fails, I can get a data science job somewhere. Like, I'm going to be fine. And so I'm going to go all in. And if it doesn't work out, then I'll figure something out. And that worked for me. You know, I don't know. Some people, maybe that's hard to kind of go all in like that, but that worked out really well for me. And that was I was able to shift my mindset. And that's what started moving me towards this job at ESPN. So
Thank you for that. Again, I fully agree, and I think, you know, there's always transferable skills, and for me, for myself, it was having a law degree that kind of made me feel like, okay, I always have a backup plan. Like, you know, some law firm, there's 100 law firms here, like a million, some of them is going to hire me. I'm better even if I have some experience in sports. So I really think at the end of the day, it is a bit of a mindset thing, and the reason why we made it, to say it like that, or why people think of us like, oh, you made it, is really because we really put our 100% focus on it, and we really became like kind of obsessed with the topic, you know, like you're all the time thinking about it, doing things about it, like everything you do is kind of directed towards that direction, I think. So I really think that that having that clear focus is so important, not doing a million things. And if you're also, because sometimes people talk to me and they're like, oh, I'm applying to like this law firm for civil law, and then, you know, every now and then I send my CV to the sports law firm or whatever. Like it's just not the same, because like you said, it's so competitive. So there's other people that are 100% focused on that, and those are people that are going to get noticed first. So focus is super important. I think we can switch to some questions. Thank you so much for the talk until now. So I see we have a question from Shi, who says, how important is the knowledge field in sports analytics? Do we have to know the sport in depth to get into sports analytics?
Yeah, great question. I have this. So when I was kind of preparing for this meeting, I wrote a list of stuff I had heard and found to be incorrect. And this was on the list, was that I've heard in my journey that like you need to know the sport you want to do inside and out. And that might be true like 10 years into your career or for a really specific role. But for the most part in sports analytics, you need to learn data analytics and data science and statistics, and then apply it to sports. And it doesn't really matter how. Like I ended up getting a job at ESPN where we actually do all the sports. Most of my experience was in basketball, and most of what I've done so far is football, and nobody cares because it, you know, like you can definitely be better at your job by knowing the sport in depth, but it's not like a prerequisite. And so hopefully that makes sense. I guess the other thing I'd say about it is a lot of times if you're working for a sports team, like the actual team, they care more about that. So maybe if your desire is like, hey, I want to work for the, you know, New York Mets, like, yeah, you want to know everything about the New York Mets. Like that's important. But if you just want to be in sports in general and you're okay with working for a third party or a news organization or a law firm or something like that, like it's less important and more just that you're familiar, you know how it works, and you can apply your skills to that industry. So hopefully that helps.
Great, thank you. Andreas, I see you raise your hand.
Yes. Hello. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for doing this. It is amazing. For giving all this information for free, I would say. I was wondering, what do you, to Christopher, I had we've been known each other through LinkedIn, I would say the last 1-2 months, and sharing this amazing content. Do you think there is a difference between the business analyst or the data scientist? And I was wondering, what is the process that differentiates you, like in the interview process? Is it like very technical? Because I have experience with when you said like, oh, what do you do in a normal day? But I was wondering, what is the technicality that sets you apart? Because someone else in the world knows more art than anyone here. And what is the main difference that the business analyst, the data scientist, and so on?
Yeah, for sure. The interesting thing about sports is that they've got business analysts and more like specific sports analysts. Like you could go work for the New York Mets and do their marketing or tickets or things like that. And you're basically a business analyst, except you get to be in sports. Or you can like actually be on the team and you're helping with like the product on the field, right? It's a little bit different. But they are different. And the main thing is just like the questions you're trying to ask. I would say that the skills are pretty similar. I'd say there's two differences. One is that you're answering different questions. So for example, when I was interviewing with ESPN, my technical assessment was I had to build a simulation of the March Madness to college basketball using, like, they gave me, hey, if Gonzaga plays Norfolk State, they have a 96% chance to win. And I had to use those probabilities and build a simulation and then tell them, you know, how often does Gonzaga win and Baylor and so on. And I did that all in R. So that's like very specific to sports. As a business analyst, obviously you're never going to do that, right? The other difference I would say is, besides the questions you're answering, is the skill set is a little different. Since sports analytics, like specifically to the product on the court or on the field, is kind of new. You know, baseball is a little older, and then kind of basketball and football started getting into. Soccer has been getting into it recently. They expect you to be able to do a little bit more on your own. So in business analytics, you might be really specific to, like, I do SQL and Tableau, and I prepare dashboards and I show people information. But in sports, like, it's not like that. You kind of have to be able to do the process from start to finish. And so if that's what you want to do, like, you really need to know how to organize the data, query it with SQL, and then analyze and do modeling with R or Python. So I don't know, hopefully that helps.
Great, thank you. Jaisal?
Yeah, thank you so much, guys, for doing this. So I actually typed in the question in the chat by mistake,
How
but
do you recommend?
In general, you know, dashboarding, Tableau, Power BI, Python R, there's a lot of technical proficiency. And so do you recommend developing that kind of skill set as you go by doing projects, or do you recommend, like, people should have some basic understanding of the skills first and then maybe try to translate it to something sports related?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I would just say go for it. In your project, you're like, I want to build a chart. Google how to build a chart in R. You know, I never took a class on how to do data visualizations in R. And over the time, I learned ggplot, I learned Shiny and all these things, integrating it with Tableau and SQL. And like, all because it was just like, wait, how do I do this? And I Google it. And that was really how I learned. So I would say, like, you're going to learn the most by doing personal projects and just trying to do whatever you need to know for that personal project. So hopefully that helps.
Sure, thanks.
I see Renedy in the chat said, do sports analysts use more often R than Python?
Good question. Yeah, I made a list. So if you're working for a team or like a media organization, in my experience, it's been more R. If you're basically any other business that's in sports, is probably Python. So like the Golden State Warriors, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Cleveland Cavaliers, Tampa Bay Rays, New York Mets, this soccer team in Italy that I can't remember the name of, all of them when I interviewed was R. ESPN is R, right? The Athletic is R. If you're like with, you know, 2K or EA Sports or, you know, Second Spectrum, which is like a basketball company that provides play-by-play data, all of those things, that's Python. So it kind of depends on where you want your niche to be. So hopefully that helps.
Great, thank you. Will?
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to do this. I think I speak for everyone on that behalf. I guess my question would probably be, what have you gained the most from your time in the sports industry as a whole?
What have I gained the most? Great question. I think that the number one thing I've gained so far is that if I decide I want to accomplish something, I can. That was a huge experience for me, because like I said, I had a lot of fears about whether or not sports would work out, whether or not I'd be able to provide. And now I'm in an awesome situation that I absolutely love, and I get to share it with other people about how to get where I am. So I would just say I've learned that really, truly, if you want something and you go for it, you'll find a way, and it's going to work out.
Thank you for that question. The last one I see raising their hand is Tushar.
Hello, everyone. So, Christopher, my question would be, there are two parts of my question. First would be, how you see right now in Europe, the Belgian superstar, soccer superstar, Kevin De Bruyne, he uses a sports analysis data to negotiate a contract with his club, and he successfully renew his contract. So how you see the role of data analyst in the coming future? Because this thing happened very successfully. I think we can say it's kind of a pilot project, but it did work for him. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, and my second question would be, what do you think about the future? What about the future of a analytic in esports right now? Because this decade would be this decade would be the part of the esport. Because in pandemic we see how it's booming right now, especially in Indian subcontinent, in Eastern Hemisphere, where numerous esports organizations are coming out right now. So how you see about that? So yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the first question, data analytics is huge for contracts, and it's kind of started being used over the last couple of years, but you're right. Like, it's a very untapped place, and agencies haven't really utilized it to that extent, but they're starting to realize, like you mentioned, like, oh, the more I know data about my player, the better I'm able to negotiate a contract and get them the money they deserve. And so, I think there's kind of two things. One is that there's going to probably be more third-party organizations that are created and built, right, piloted towards that. And then I also think that sports agencies that already exist are going to start hiring more data analysts. So the other cool thing about sports analytics is that it is a growing field. Like, baseball is probably the only sport that's really like nailed sports analytics. All the other sports are still trying to figure it out. So there's huge opportunity for you to get into it. There's going to be more and more roles that open up as teams and organizations realize more and more how valuable having a data analytics team is. So that, hopefully that helps answer your first question. And then your second question, esports is absolutely awesome. I interviewed like a year ago for a job with Madison Square Garden, who owns the Knicks, and a couple other organizations. And it was actually for their esports team. So they have like an esports team, and I was going to be a data analyst for their esports team. And it was pretty new. But like that, similar to kind of the same vibe. It's absolutely a place where data analytics can be helpful, even if it doesn't really seem like that. Like, honestly, for me, when I first recognized that they were using data for video games, I was like, wait, what? Like, what data do you even have? But they have it, and it's awesome, and it's just as helpful as live sports. And so I'd say, if that's something you're interested in, like, same thing applies. Do a personal project, pick your favorite game, and gather data and show how you were able to improve something using data. And that's going to help you get into esports, because, like you said, that industry is going to boom. There's going to be tons of opportunities there.
Because in India, there are some of the esport organizations like SATUL, Godlike, these Indian esports organizations, they are using this data analysis right now. And they successfully implemented in their tournaments, which happened this last month only in India. So I think it's a really good growing field right now. And I hope this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm with you. I will put the recommendations of the podcast, which Jessie asked in your question. So I know there are two podcasts. One is the What in Moneyball post-game podcast, and second would be the Fanalytics with Mike Lewis podcast. These are two podcasts which I think will help the people who want to get to know more about the data analysis. So yeah, that would be all from my side. Yeah, thank you so much, Jessie. Yeah. Thank you, Christopher.
You can share them in the chat, maybe.
I will definitely. Yeah.
So we'll do the last question, and if you guys have any other questions, you can always reach out to us on LinkedIn. So Alfredo.
Much for your time, Christopher. That's amazing input. My specific questions regarding what is the reason about the basketball NBA, I don't know, or Euroleagues, what is not popular in England market? I don't know if you have any explanation regarding that, or strategic market regarding the commercial opportunity in UK. What is the real cost regarding the basketball in UK, or I don't know, Wales, Ireland, Scotland, this country from UK?
I'm not sure I totally follow the question. Are you asking like how I think that basketball is going to grow in the UK, or?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. Yeah, I think it's been, the NBA in the past 10 years has become much more global than it was 10 years ago. I mean, it's honestly kind of crazy. Our top three MVP candidates in the NBA right now, Joel Embiid, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Nikola Jokic, are all international. So I think there's an awesome opportunity for basketball to continue to grow outside the United States. And as that talent continues to get developed, I think the leagues outside the US are going to continue to get more competitive. They already are. We saw at the Olympics, the US had a lot harder time. They ended up winning gold, but like, it was a much more difficult process than it maybe has been in Olympics past. And so there's a ton of competition that's growing out there. And I do think that those leagues are a little bit more in the baby stages of using data analytics, but they are realizing that it's usable. And that would be an awesome opportunity to do what we talked about at the beginning. You could volunteer your services for free for any league that's out there, and they're going to take that up because they don't have the resources to pay anybody to do it anyway. And over time, you can build, you know, your footprint in that area. So hopefully that helps.
Okay, nice.
Great. Well, guys, thank you so much. Our time is up, but if you guys have any questions, like we said, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. We're happy to share all this knowledge with you guys. We hope it was valuable. Yeah, let's stay in touch, and I hope you guys all pursue your dream, and that this really kind of helps you shift your mindset, and that, like Chris was saying before, that you see that there's actually people out there doing the type of job that you know, that you want to pursue. So I hope these insights were helpful, and see you next time. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jesse. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
so
guys.
much.
Thank you.